So looking at this, the Webster definition of apprentice is one who is learning by practical experience, bound by indenture to serve another for a prescribed period of time with a view to learn the art of a trade. An intern is typically more a student or a recent graduate, basically in the same context, but they're really looking more at gaining supervised practical experience related to the field that they're studying in school. Last year, that's a picture of we actually had 4 apprentices and 1 volunteer, and a volunteer is described as people who come out to help on assorted projects that don't need to be supervised. That means, and this in this context, it's someone comes over and I say, go weed the carrots. They're in row 9 east, and they go weed the carrots, and I don't have to go down there and show them how to weed the carrots. Or they come to help harvest pumpkins, and I just say, well, there's a wheelbarrow, here's some gloves, go harvest pumpkins. And I mean, ultimately, that's the difference. A volunteer doesn't need to be supervised. They're considered a visitor to the farm, and your basic liability policy should cover them. In the same perspective, if a neighbor comes to weed your beets and takes home some beets to can, they're still considered a visitor to your farm, and the liability of your farm policy should cover them. But if you enter into agreement with a volunteer to work regularly on your place in exchange for produce, then technically you should contact the Department of Labor and clarify their status as a volunteer. And it's a little different in Idaho than it is in Washington, and I'm sure that's a little different state to state. But basically, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past when we were talking about wages and different things. Stan talked about this. If the exchange is under $600, it's not likely that you have to issue a 1099, and generally that's not required for anything under this amount. And I know Stan uses a lot of his pickers and young people on the farm in this context, because he's using a lot of high school students that come just one day a week for a few hours, or maybe a couple days a week for just a few hours at a time, and they help him get his crop in, and it works that way. But just know that there is a difference between the definitions of volunteers versus interns versus apprentices. We have worked quite a bit with students from University of Idaho and Washington State University, to some here working on graduate programs, some earning college credits by doing some kind of project on the farm. We do a fair amount of on-farm research, but we do offer, well, I'll stick to this slide and I'll go into this in a minute. But if you provide room and board or pay them, the apprentice or intern is actually considered an employee by the Department of Labor. And basically, if any employer wants to host an internship and pay less than minimum wage, and this might be with students that Ken was talking about that a little bit. Oftentimes students are in a different realm. That also goes into the Department of Labor. There are some gray areas there, and it kind of has to do with what they're receiving, what the expectations are, what your agreement is. There's a lot of gray areas there. I think in the handouts on the Moodle site there is an application with the state of Idaho that they have set up for going through that process. But I always have people, because we've had 31 apprentices and we've been actively doing this, and I always have people say, oh, I need free labor. I want free labor. And really, I don't consider it free labor at all, because it takes more time to teach. and I feel a much greater obligation to instruct them than I would with just paying somebody. I mean, we've designed an on-farm organic gardening workshop series specifically to focus on educational opportunities for our students, and I'll outline how we do it at Green Tree Naturals. But it's not the easiest thing to get the work done and teach them how you think through the process. And it's kind of like you always hear people talking about, oh, free grant money. Well, there's no such thing as free grant money. You have to work at it, and you've got to be well informed and plan ahead. And when it comes to interns, it's not free labor by any means. You're working for that, and you need to know that that's kind of what it's all about. It's not, you just need to be prepared and be clear with the intern and apprentice agreements. So just like Ken was talking about, it's really important to have a good agreement outlined and have all of that written down so it's very clear what your expectations are. So we have an agreement that we go through with them before we accept them, and that's after the application process, after I've interviewed their references and found out what kind of personality types they are. After I've done a Skype interview with them, then we go into more detail of what we expect from them and vice versa to make that a good working relationship. But you really need to think about what kind of living arrangement are you going to have with an intern. Are they going to receive room and board? Are you feeding them and preparing meals? Are they going to be living in your house? That's a completely different thing versus a trailer outside, or we've often had some that wanted to camp. Well, we can't do that. We interface with too much wildlife. That would be kind of a dangerous thing. We have a long list of farm rules that I think every year we add another rule to that list, and it's crucial to us that we go through that with our interns and walk them through. We give them a copy of it, and then we sit down one-on-one and talk about it. So we're kind of covering different learning styles, so they not only hear from me exactly what my expectations are and what the rules of being here. I let them know, I want them to be a part of this farm, and really, if you're going to have good interns, they need to have buy-in to what you're doing, but they also need to be respecting what we have here, and that goes with their responsibility for pets and visitors they have, and we, like I say, we've learned through the school of hard knocks, that's for sure, and we've made a lot of mistakes, and I just call those mistakes compost for the spirit, and it teaches me how to work through it, and we just keep moving forward. So in our, we do this a little different than most. We have our apprentices with us only 3 days a week. Our commitment is Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, and I do that because of my work schedule, and we have a set schedule that has worked for us for years. On Wednesdays I'm doing deliveries, so I'm not here to supervise them. On Fridays I'm doing deliveries, I'm not here to supervise them. On weekends I'm doing farmers market, and frankly I'm not willing to accept the responsibility of supervising and instructing someone 5 days a week or 7 days a week. So in our apprenticeship program, it's really designed to teach, and we focus on the educational concept. We really work on the hands-on training and side-by-side mentorship, and with that, as a true educational component associated with what we're doing, I outline the budget cost associated with the apprenticeship. They do, and in that breakdown of the budget that I set up for the apprenticeship, there's the 6-week organic gardening series. If they were to pay for that, costs $150. If they were to get the 14-week CSA, that's $500.50. If they were to pay for lunch on the 3 days a week they're with typically 21 weeks approximately, so $20 a week, that's $420. The rental on the trailer is $25 a month, and that's how I came up with that $1,470. And in their agreement, I've outlined the budget. I want them to see that there's a value to their tenure here with us, and then they sign an agreement that says, I agree to the terms outlined here and understand that as an intern, I'm not entitled to wages or compensation for activities conducted pursuant to this apprenticeship program. They sign that, and then I ask them at the end of the year, so they know how much this cost them, I ask them to make a donation to the farm in whatever amount they feel this experience was worth. And that meets a number of different needs. Number one, it's truly an educational program, so we're not bound by some of the aspects of an employee-employer status. So I kind of went through that fairly quickly, but I wanted to give you time for questions, although I don't see any questions there. But this has what has worked for us. I can't say that we have ever hired employees. We have a few friends, like right now we have a friend that's been coming a couple days a week to volunteer his time, and he says he'll work for food. So I feed him lunch, and he's doing carpentry work, and him and my husband Tom are in the process of building a walk-in cooler and finishing off a high tunnel and getting that to the next step. We have a person that's going to be volunteering this summer who was an apprentice with us that returned with us for 3 years. She did one full year apprenticeship and then came back 2 more years, and she's going to be volunteering this year, which means she'll come whenever she wants. I'll have a list of things to do, and she will go out and do them unsupervised, and I know that she'll work fine with us. And we also have another, so at any rate, we do have volunteers, and that means that I'm not supervising them, but the apprenticeship is kind of another perspective. So I'll open that up for questions.
I can go ahead and facilitate that if you want, Diane, because there's a lot of questions. Okay. And
I'm not seeing any questions.
Huh. Well, there are a lot. So.
Well, that's good that it's up to you then.
And these questions are both for you and for Ken. So I'm just going to go through them in order. So the first ones are for Ken. What are the exemptions for workers' comp? When wouldn't you need it for an employee?
Okay, there's a, maybe, I don't know that, I know there's an hourly exemption. I'm not familiar exactly what that is, or I say it's a dollar exemption up to a certain point, and there's also a family exemption. And I think there's a Idaho, it's called the Guide to Idaho Labor Laws, and the Department of Labor in Idaho, you can check with them. I'm sorry I don't have the exact answer. Maybe Diane does.
I thought it was $600.
I do know that if you hire somebody that is representing themselves as basically a contractor, and they don't have, you're not required to require them to have this type of insurance, but if they don't have it and they're injured, they can seek, redress against their employer, the contractor, and against you. So it's pretty important to make sure that you're covered liability-wise from workers who are on your farm, whether they're hired or contracted.